Kriegsmarine faced a highly problematic situation. Two of its most important capital ships, docked in Brest, France, were under constant attack by the Royal Air Force, which was determined to disrupt their repair cycles. Meanwhile, the Scharnhorst-class battleships were desperately needed in Norway to dissuade British commandos from operating in the Nazi-occupied coastal territory. But getting from northern France to Norway meant going around the British Isles or piercing the English Channel. Both options were almost hopeless. Going north and around the British Isles meant traversing dangerously close to the British main battle fleet at Scapa Flow. If the British intercepted the German capital ships, they would be decimated. On the other hand, going through the English Channel meant exposing themselves to the full might of the Royal Air Force, with minefields, torpedo boats, and fast warships exerting a naval blockade. As the matter became more pressing, the Kriegsmarine decided to do the unthinkable and attempt to do what no hostile fleet had managed to achieve in over 300 years, a frantic naval dash across the English Channel. Vital vessels. Despite its military might, Germany was not known during World War II for its overwhelming naval power. Their maritime assets were limited, and they had to be used to counter the might of the British and American fleets. Most of their operations would revolve around underhanded U-boat tactics instead of full-fledged fleet-to-fleet battles. Nevertheless, Germany did possess a few powerful naval assets, including the Scharnhorst-class battleships Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. During the winter of 1940-41, the two mighty capital ships wreaked havoc in the Atlantic, sinking 115,622 long tons of British resources at a rate that no other Axis ship would match during the war. After their exemplary patrol in the Atlantic, the ships made their way to Brest for repairs. Now more than ever, the two capital ships were crucial to Germany's efforts to cut off Britain's maritime supply lines. The vessels were so vital that the repairs were carried out exclusively by German nationals, as the country feared that French resistance members might sabotage the ships or inform the British about their status and location. Scharnhorst had suffered severe damage to her boilers, and she needed 10 weeks of repairs. In contrast, Gneisenau had only minor damage and would be ready to sail again in just a week. RAF bombings. The repairs wouldn't go as planned for the German capital ships, and they were spotted by a patrolling Spitfire 6 days after they arrived in port. The grounded ships immediately became a primary target for the Royal British Air Force, and they immediately launched an aggressive campaign against Brest, seeking to destroy the two capital ships, or at least postpone their return to sea for as long as possible. The air offensive lasted from January 10th to mid-April 1941, during which Britain deployed 1,161 sorties targeting the two German vessels. On their side, the German forces reinforced their anti-air defenses and began to employ a smokescreen system, covering the port in a daily heavy blanket to reduce the RAF's aiming capabilities. The German ships were damaged on several occasions, but no strike was powerful enough to fully disable them, or completely undo the repair proceedings. However, the vessels remained trapped inside the port. As the air raids continued, Adolf Hitler became concerned about an incoming British invasion of Norway. British commandos had recently conducted numerous missions on the coasts of Norway, and German intelligence suspected that these operations were the preliminary steps to a full-fledged invasion. Hitler wanted the trapped ships to be redeployed to Norway so they could be used against a possible British attack. And even if German soil had somewhat benefited from Britain's fixation on the two German vessels in France, Hitler knew it was only a matter of time before they would be destroyed. Opting for a dash. Logic dictated that the ships would have to go around the British Isles to reach the Norwegian Sea. In contrast, going through the English Channel was considered self-destruction. The RAF exercised air supremacy over the Channel, whose waters were heavily mined. Also, The Royal Navy had a wide array of fast torpedo boats and ships at its disposal to intercept any enemy vessel attempting to cross the narrow waterway. Historically, Britain had always made it a military priority to control the channel, and no hostile naval force had survived when crossing the waterway in over 300 years. Moreover, most German naval commanders, including Karl Dönitz, considered the idea absurd. Circling around the British Isles also had its risks, as the ships would come dangerously close to the full might of the British Navy at Scapa Flow. If the German vessels were detected and engaged by the fleet, they would be utterly obliterated. Still, Hitler was determined, and the ships at Brest would dash through the English Channel in a surprise operation. A naval orchestra. The operation was carefully planned, with each tiny detail accounted for. There were no drills or trials, as Hitler wanted the procedure to take the British by surprise. Nevertheless, the risky endeavor had many moving pieces. Scharnhorst and Gneisenau would be accompanied by the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen and escorted by 6 destroyers, 14 torpedo boats, and 26 E-boats. The fleet would closely hug the coast of France, from where the Luftwaffe would provide air support, using 32 bombers and 252 fighters. The 2 battleships and the heavy cruiser would be protected by a wall of torpedo boats and E-boats, and the Luftwaffe would intervene if the RAF decided to strike. German minesweepers did their best to clear some of the mine sections in the channel and mark some of the ones they couldn't clear days before the operation. However, they knew that thousands of mines would still be in their path. Meanwhile, the German signal service was instructed to blast weak transmissions every morning for several weeks. These signals significantly degraded the British coastal radar capabilities, and thus their ability to detect enemy ships in the English Channel. The signals were so weak that British technicians were sure they were caused by morning atmospheric interference, and they took no action. Still, the British were not completely oblivious to a possible move in Brest, and had concocted Operation Fuller to swiftly respond if the German ships tried to leave the French port. Moving fast. On February 11th, 1942, the German vessels left Brest covered by darkness and terrible weather conditions. A British spy on Brest took notice but could not report because the Germans had jammed the radio communication. The fleet moved fast, and the navigators fought to keep the ships out of the British mine zones. As the vessels entered the channel undetected, the Luftwaffe deployed several bombers to confuse British warplanes and divert them from the area. The weather also limited Britain's air patrol capabilities, and the fleet moved halfway down the channel undetected. They were close to Le Havre when a British air patrol spotted German aircraft circling an area by the coast, but since they didn't spot any ships, they reported that the Germans were possibly carrying out a search and rescue operation. The RAF then sent 2 Spitfires to investigate, and they spotted the fleet's escort, but not the capital ships. By the time the Spitfires reported the presence of a German flotilla, a radar station at Beachy Head had detected 2 possible battleship-sized vessels. It was time to unleash Operation Fuller. The battle. The engagement began just as the German fleet reached the narrowest section of the English Channel, between Dover and Calais. The Royal Navy had deployed dozens of swordfish and motor torpedo boats to intercept the Germans, and the 9-inch coastal guns at Dover soon began firing at the German ships with no success. Soon, the first British torpedo boats intercepted the enemy fleet, but they were met with a daunting wall of German escorts and could not reach the capital ships. The British were quickly engaged by the German E-boats and forced to fire their torpedoes from a long range, which were easily evaded by the German vessels. Lieutenant Commander Eugene Esmond led 6 swordfish and 10 Spitfires, tasked with intercepting the German fleet. Esmond knew the odds of surviving the fleet's anti-aircraft attacks were few, but he decided to engage anyway, and the fleet was met by German 109 and 190 fighters and relentless anti-air fire from the ships. The Spitfires pursued the German fighter, while the swordfish attempted to reach the capital ships. Still, more German fighters attacked the old bombers and quickly destroyed Esmond's plane and the other 5 bombers. The battle continued for several hours, with the British sending wave after wave of torpedo boats and warplanes to intercept the fleet. However, they continually failed to pierce the German defenses, and every torpedo missed its mark. Nevertheless, the German capital ships hit several mines during the desperate clash, and the Gneisenau was temporarily disabled and left behind. Astonishingly, the British failed to locate the stranded ship, and they continued to concentrate their attacks on the moving fleet to no avail. 45 minutes later, Gneisenau was repaired and rushed to catch up with the German fleet. The British then threw everything they had at the Germans, diverting 6 old World War I destroyers and over 200 warplanes to intercept the fleet. Still, the weather was deteriorating quickly, and the aircraft couldn't hit any of their targets. German triumph. Despite light damage from sinking mines, the 2 leading ships arrived in the German port of Brunsbüttel the following morning, evading the might of the British military. Soon after, Gneisenau made it to Wilhelmshaven. The operation was an unbelievable success. The Germans managed to do what no other hostile fleet was able to achieve in centuries, and they sustained minimal damage. For Britain, the event was an endless source of humiliation, as it failed to enforce its blockade in its own channel. The failure of the bomber command to land a single hit, and the inability of the Navy to strike with a single torpedo made several headlines, and the press deemed the event a fiasco. For a moment, the Kriegsmarine felt empowered, and the world was left wondering about Britain's combined forces' capabilities. Thank you for watching our video. Don't hesitate to click on the screen and explore some of our other Dark Documentaries channels, where you'll find more incredible stories featuring the most groundbreaking warfare technology and the bold heroes that used it. Stay tuned.